We're on the bottom of 81a, Pei Aleph, Amud Aleph. We're in the middle of discussing how we know that there is a prohibition to eat in Yom Kippur, in addition to the fulfillment of the commandment, the positive commandment of self-inflicting pain, thou shalt fast, and the punishment of excision, this which we know already. The Gemara is now looking for the prohibition, the negative commandment, thou shalt not eat. And so far, we had two ways of going about this. One is, well, actually three, two so far. Ravina says that the verse says, with respect to working on Yom Kippur, the prohibition to work on Yom Kippur, the verse says, the very essence of this day, on this very day. And with respect to the prohibition or the commandment to eat, the commandment to fast, the commandment to inflict pain, it's on this very day. Because the same wording is used, it's in the same way when it comes to the prohibition of working. The Torah doesn't punish you before it tells you a prohibition, thou shalt not. So likewise, when the Torah punishes you for violating the commandment to fast, it also comes with a prohibition, thou shalt not eat. Even though it's not explicitly stated, it's implied by this comparison. That was one way of understanding it. The second way of understanding it is that with respect to not working on Yom Kippur, it's stated 5 times not to work on Yom Kippur. 1 for night, 1 for day, 1 for punishment at night, 1 for punishment at day, leaving a 5th time that the Torah says not to work on Yom Kippur as free to use for comparative analysis. And that's used to teach you that eating on Yom Kippur is also a violation of a negative commandment in addition to the positive commandment of thou shalt fast. That's what we had so far. So our 3 lines. Could be. Okay. No, that's okay. Okay, Devei Rabbi Shmuel Tana. Now we have a third way of finding an implication in the text, in scripture. Thank you. Finding an implication that there is a prohibition to eat in addition to the positive commandment of thou shalt inflict pain upon yourself by denying yourself food. So Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel Tana, at the study house of Rabbi Shmuel, they would teach. Nemar kan inui. It says here, with respect to the commandment of fasting, the word used is inui. We're familiar with this word. It means to self-inflict pain. Nemar lahalon inui. And it says elsewhere, the word inui. The second time is referring to if one person violates, God forbid, another person's wife. And there, when it describes the punishment, it describes al davar asher inna es eshes re'eu, with respect to the matter that he inflicted pain, using this word inui, on the wife of his friend. It's because there, ma'lahalon, just like there, with respect to the law regarding a person who violates another woman's wife, another man's wife. Lo anash, the Torah does not give a punishment. Elam kain hizir, only after it first says, do not do that. Afkan, so to here, with respect to one who doesn't fast in Yom Kippur, lo anash, the punishment does not come, elam kain, only considering hizir, the fact that the Torah already told you not to do so. Even though it's not stated explicitly, it's implied by the fact that the word is used in another context where there is a punishment and a prohibition. Clear? Okay, so that's option number 3. Not the first 2 options, we're comparing it to the other law of Yom Kippur, the law of not working on Yom Kippur. 2 different ways to compare it, because there's an extra time the Torah tells you not to work, or because there's the same phraseology on the essence of that day. But it's always the comparison with in Yom Kippur, not eating on Yom Kippur compared to not working on Yom Kippur. And here we introduce a whole other law to compare it to, just by virtue of the fact that the same word, the same phraseology is used. Okay, fourth way of coming to the conclusion that there's a prohibition to eat on Yom Kippur in addition to the positive commandment of inflicting pain upon yourself. Rav Acha son of Yaakov says, Yalef derives Shabbos Shabbosayim. The Torah describes Yom Kippur as the Shabbos of Shabboses, or Shabbatot. Shabbos literally means a day of rest. So whenever the Torah says don't work on, or whenever the Torah says that it shall be a Shabbos for you, the Torah is telling you not to work, right? But that's the positive commandment of not working. Thou shalt rest. And then it also might say, like Sasa Melacha, don't do any work. So it's a positive and a negative commandment. When it comes to Yom Kippur, the Torah describes it as Shabbos Shabbosayim, the Shabbos of all Shabbatot, the day of rest of all days of rest, if you will. Sorry? Exactly. So therefore we can compare it to Shabbos Bereshis, we can compare it to the weekly Shabbos. The weekly Shabbos is called the Shabbos Bereshis, because it's the Shabbos that commemorates the beginning of creation. So the weekly Shabbos is referred to as the Shabbos of creation, because every week we're celebrating creation, or the rest of creation, the rest that God did after creation. So if your Torah calls Yom Kippur the Shabbos of all Shabboses, and the law of Shabbos, an ordinary Shabbos, or regular Shabbos, a Shabbos commemorating Bereshis, a Shabbos commemorating the beginning of creation. Malahalan, just like there, on a regular Shabbos, like Onash, the Torah's punishment only comes Elam Kain Hizer, only after the Torah already tells you do not work. Afkan, so to here on Yom Kippur, like Onash, Torah would not punish you, considering that this too is a Shabbos, Elam Kain Hizer, only if there already is a implied prohibition, even if not explicit. So this is option number 4 to derive that there is a prohibition to fast on Yom Kippur. Comparing it to the laws of Shabbos, considering the Torah calls it Shabbos, calls Yom Kippur Shabbos. Papa says, Hu Gufa Shabbos Ikri. Shabbos itself, Yom Kippur itself is called a Shabbos. And therefore you don't have to compare it to the fact that on Shabbos there is a commandment, a prohibition, and then a punishment. But from the very fact that it itself is called Shabbos, itself does that. The Ksiv, as the verse reads, Tishbu Shabbatchem, you shall rest on your Shabbos, referring to Yom Kippur. This is a verse with respect to Yom Kippur. The entire verse reads, I don't know, in your copy it's on the right, I think. Shalom. It's on the left. No, whoops. Yeah, the left, under that goy sabach, you'll see Torah Shalom, it says, Shabbos Shabbos and Hulachem, a Shabbos of all Shabbos it is for you. The misim es nafshasechem, and you shall inflict pain upon yourself. But Tisha Lochedesh, the 9th of the month, we'll get Ba'erev in the evening, meaning you eat at the end of the 9th day. Me'erev ad Erev, from evening till the next evening, evening of the 9th till the next evening of the 9th, going to the 10th, all the way to the next night. We'll discuss that in a moment. Tish b'Shabbatchem, you shall rest on your Shabbos. So you see here that the Torah refers to the inflicting pain, the fasting, that too is a Shabbos. You shall rest from eating. So it's not only that Yom Kippur is called Shabbos because you don't work. So therefore we can compare it to the other Shabbos and bring the prohibition from there into here. It says, you don't have to do that. Even fasting itself, the Torah refers to as a Shabbos, a rest from eating. And therefore all of the types of prohibitions and punishments that apply to not working, which is the essence of what the word Shabbos means, not to work, also apply to fasting, because the Torah calls that too, Shabbos. Resting from eating. Following? Okay. So it's not derived by comparing it to the Shabbos, the law of Shabbos on a regular week, but from the description of itself being a Shabbos, the description of fasting itself being a Shabbos. In that Shabbos means to refrain from something, and here a person's refraining from eating. The Torah calls that Tish b'Shabbatchem, rest on your Shabbos in the context of the fast. Okay, now the Gemara compares the latter to okay, so so just to explain that's a good point. The levels of holiness in halacha, the word holiness in halacha for sure, but even in Chassidus or elsewhere in Judaism, the word holy, kadosh, means to be removed. To be removed. So the more one removes, the more one disengages from ordinary living, the more kadosh, holy it is. And the same thing is true of Shabbos. As you increase in your refraining from engaging the world, the more Shabbos it is, the more Shabbos-like it is. So Yom Tif, there's a certain level of prohibition, but then there's certain things you're allowed to. For example, you can cook. So it's not the same level of Kadosh, of holiness, and not the same level of Shabbos. On a weekly Shabbos, there's more. You can't cook even. So it's a higher level of Shabbos, higher level of Kadosh. And then Yom Kippur is Shabbos Shabbosim, because not only you're not working, you're also not eating. Okay? So it's true that on Shabbos you can't stop yourself from eating because you have to enjoy. But in terms of because you have to enjoy Shabbos, even though Yom Kippur is also a day of joy, a day of joy of the soul, not a joy of the body. Well, Shabbos includes the joy of the body. But in terms of the disengaging factor, Yom Kippur is just one level up. Disengaged from working and then disengaged from eating. So it's Shabbos, it's even this loftier Shabbos. And therefore, when the verse concludes, Tishbu Shabbat, you shall rest on your Shabbos, it also includes that which it said half a line earlier, which is, you shall inflict pain upon yourself, which is not to eat. So the not eating is also called a Shabbos-like activity. Thus includes the prohibition that would come along with a regular Shabbos-like activity, or a regular Shabbos-like commandment. Follow? Okay, so the Gemara now analyzes the latter two scholars and asks why each one does not pick up the other one. They're both analyzing Yom Kippur as a Shabbos experience and thus deriving that there's an implied prohibition. The difference is only that Rav Acha bar Yaakov compares it to the regular Shabbos weekday, the regular weekly Shabbos, whereas Rav Papa says that it itself is called Shabbos. Fasting itself is called Shabbos. Why the difference? So it says the Gemara Bishlema, I understand it is all well, Rav Papa. Loy Omar Rav Acha bar Yaakov, the reason why Rav Papa did not say that which Rav Acha bar Yaakov did, Rav Papa did not compare the Shabbos element of Yom Kippur to the weekly Shabbos, but rather derived it from Yom Kippur itself, and that the Torah calls fasting a Shabbos type activity. It's easy to understand why he didn't do that. Because a verse which is stated about itself is better than bringing it from an analysis somewhere else. So better learn the law of Yom Kippur from the verses describing Yom Kippur than the law of Yom Kippur from the verses describing Shabbos. And therefore, when the Torah itself describes the fasting on Yom Kippur as a Shabbos thing, that itself tells you there's a prohibitive element. Because all Shabbos comes with a prohibitive element. The question becomes, Ella, but Rav Acha bar Yaakov, who did compare Shabbos and Yom Kippur to the Shabbos of the regular week, my time of Amar Papa, why didn't he not use the same derivation our Papa did to derive from the fact that the verse itself describes fasting as a Shabbos type commandment? Why does he have to compare it to another mitzvah, another commandment, the mitzvah of a weekly Shabbos? Clear on the Gemara's question? So it says the Gemara, the reason why he could not derive from the verse itself that describes fasting as a Shabbos, because that verse is required to teach us another law. Namely, look at the Tanya, as we've learned in the Mishnaic age text, Rav Acha bar Yaakov and Rav Papa are both scholars from the Gemara's age, and now we're quoting a Mishnaic age text which reads, it quotes the verse we just read. All right, to look on the left, we saw the entirety of the verse again is Shabbos Shabbosim. It's a Shabbos of all Shabbos. Hu lachem, it is for you. You shall inflict pain upon yourself. You should fast. The Tisha l'chodesh, on the 9th day of the month, be'erev, in that evening, at the end of the 9th day, me'erev, from that evening, ad erev to the next evening, right, from the evening at the end of the 9th to the evening at the end of the 10th, Tish b'shabbatchem, you shall rest on your Shabbos. Make it your Shabbos. Make it your rest day. So now let's analyze that verse. Says this Mishnah, its text says this brisa. The verse reads, "You shall inflict pain upon yourself. You shall fast in the 9th day of the month." Says the Gemara, so one might have thought, just reading those words, that one begins fasting on the 9th, 2-day fast, 48-hour fast. Torah says elsewhere on the 10th day, and here it says the 9th day. Okay, fast 48 hours. Says the Gemara, well, Talmud, the very next verse comes to teach you, but in the evening of the 9th, at the end of the 9th, begin your fast. So, if what that means is only after the 9th is ended, completely in the evening, maybe when it gets completely dark. So maybe when the verse says, on the 9th day, in the evening, it means when the 9th day is gone, once it's fully dark, right? The 10th day starts at night, the night before, right? Talmud, but the verse said 2 minutes just right before Tisha, the 9th. So how do I maintain both of these statements? On the one hand, that has to be the 9th day. On the other hand, it's got to be the evening. If it's the evening, it's already not 9th day anymore. So what does this teach you? You got to begin your fast sometime during the day, just prior to sunset. Twilight time, a little before. So you end up having a 25 or 26-hour fast instead of a 24-hour fast. Because you start a little bit of the 9th day. And that way we've combined both these elements of the verse. It is the 9th day still, but it's evening time because it's getting close to the end of the 9th day. So Mikan, from here, says the Gemara, this is the source, the biblical source for the idea of adding to the holy days by bringing it in early. On Shabbos, we start 18 minutes before sundown. We light Shabbos candles. Sometimes, likewise with Yom Kippur. And the same thing with Yom Kippur. We start a little early, but this is the source for it. And the fact that the Torah says to fast on the 9th and in the evening, telling you in the 9th before the evening of the 10th. This is the source of this idea of adding to Shabbat, to holiness, adding to your Shabbos, adding to whatever holy day it is by starting a little early. Now the Gemara continues, and this Mishnah text continues. This is not only true with respect to the beginning of whatever holy day it is, that you have to increase and add to the holy day. As the day comes to an end, Minayin, how do I know that I have to add? Meaning, end Shabbos, and Yom Kippur, and Yom Tov a little late. But davening Ma'ariv a few minutes later. Like Nadalah a few minutes later. Which is factored into our calendar already. Into our, you have a 25-hour Shabbos, roughly, as opposed to 24. So Talmud Leimar comes to the verse and says, Me'erev ad erev, right? The verse read, on the 9th day in the evening, that told you that you should start at the evening, just at the end of the 9th, before the 10th. And the next word is, till the evening. That's telling you the next day evening should be treated the same way the previous day evening was treated. In the same way the previous day evening was treated, in that you added to the day of holiness by beginning a little early. The next day evening should also be treated the same way, and that you should add to the day of holiness by ending a little late. So the Ein Li Yom Kippur, maybe this whole idea is restricted to Yom Kippur, because that's where the verse is speaking of, right? How do we know this refers to Yom Tovim B'nayin? How do we know this refers to every other Yom Tiv? Talmud Leimar comes to the verse and says, Tishbasu, thou shalt rest. So any day of rest is included in this law to begin early and end late. Ein li ela Yom Tovim. Maybe this only is Yom Tovim. Shabbos is a weekly Shabbos Minayin. How do I know that I have to begin early and end late? Talmud Leimar comes to the verse and says, Shabbatchem, rest on your Shabbos. So if we read the verse, then it reads as follows. Shabbos, and go back against the left where that verse is quoted. Shabbos, it's a Shabbos of all Shabboses. It's a shechem and you shall fast. Okay. But Tish on the 9th day, L'chodesh of the month, Ba'erev in the evening. On the 9th day, just before the evening starts, begin your day. May Erev, starting from that evening, which begins just a little before the day, before the nighttime, Ad Erev, until the next evening. In that, the next evening should be treated the same way that you end late. Tishbasu, this law of beginning early and ending late also applies to any time you rest, which is Yom Tov. Shabbatchem, and on every one of your Shabbosim. That's how we read the verse now. that's the case, these words, you shall rest on your Shabbos, is not, as our Papa implied, to teach you that fasting itself is considered a Shabbos, but rather to teach you that all Shabbosim share this law of beginning early and ending late. So this explains why Achabar Yaakov would not follow our Papa, and he would not derive the prohibition element with respect to thou shalt not eat on Yom Kippur. He did not derive that from this verse, from the fact that the Torah refers to fasting as a Shabbos, because that word is required to teach us that Shabbos gets the law of beginning early and ending late. Clear? Okay. And as the Gemara concludes here, Mikan, from here we derive, from here we derive in every circumstance, Yom Kippur, Yom Tov, for Shabbos, one is to begin early and end late. Okay, a few more lines and we conclude this section of the Gemara. The Tana de Etzem. Sorry? That's correct. This verse, the verse which described fasting as a Shabbos, or the verse that uses the word Shabbos in the context of fasting, is used not to teach you anything about fasting, but to teach you about something about every other Shabbos that's got to begin early and end late. And therefore it's not available, it's not free. It's not free for you to say that this is to tell you that fasting is also a Shabbos, and therefore there's a prohibition there, as our Papa wanted to do. Okay. Now the Gemara says like this, the scholar, the sage earlier, which said that we derive a prohibition to eat on Yom Kippur from the fact that the word etzem, the word on the essence of this day, is used to describe the punishment of eating on Yom Kippur. And it's also used to describe the punishment of working on Yom Kippur. And just like working on Yom Kippur is precipitated by the punishment for working on Yom Kippur is preceded by the prohibition, thou shalt not work. So likewise, the punishment which comes for one who eats on Yom Kippur is also implied that it begins with the prohibition, thou shalt not work on Yom Kippur. It's not stated explicitly, right? So this person, what does he need from the verse which says that the fast begins on the 9th? What's the problem? That scholar said, that Mishnah H text, the first one we introduced, said that the original verse, of which it says on the essence of this day, was there to tell you that you are punished even if you violate Yom Kippur in the time when you added to Yom Kippur. That's correct. That's what we're referring to. This is what we're referring to. We're referring to that earlier text. It's that text which concludes on the essence of this day with respect to the punishment. Sorry? Right. He learned that the essence, you're only punished when you violate Yom Kippur on the essence of the day, but you're not punished when you violate Yom Kippur for the time. Sorry, yes, correct. I'm sorry. I said it in the reverse. You're right. I'm sorry. Yes, one second. Right. So he learned like this. He wanted to learn that you would have thought that if you violate Yom Kippur in the time that you added to Yom Kippur, you get the full punishment of excision of kares. Comes the verse and says, on the essence of the day, only these 24 hours are you held to that standard of punishment. But if you violate Yom Kippur the time before and time after, you don't get punished. What that means is that you actually should add to that time. That means it exists. And the fact that the Torah says you only get punished in the 24 hours, not in the extra time, means the extra time exists. That's correct. And if that's the case, you don't need the verse of the 9th day to tell you to add that time, because you already know it exists by virtue of the fact that the Torah says you're not punished during that time. The bottom line, it exists. And then for my other day, what did you do with this verse that says the 9th day? Seemingly the law that has taught us before, we already know. From the fact that punishment is restricted. So 24 hours, it's implied that the day extends more than 24 hours. And if you don't need this verse, the 9th day, to tell you that the Yom Kippur begins on the 9th day. Follow? Says the Gemara, "Miboyole." This Tana needs it to teach us the Tani Rav Chia bar Rav Midafti comes to teach us the law which Rav Chia, son of Rav from Dafti, taught us. The Tani Chia bar Rav Midafti, because Chia, son of Rav of Dafti, taught us, quoting the verse, "The nisim es nafshesechem betisha." The verse we said earlier says, "You shall inflict pain upon yourself. You shall fast on the 9th day." And earlier we said it's to tell you that the fast begins a little bit of the 9th day before the end. But at the end of the day, the verse actually means the 9th. Because the way we read it, Tisha B'Erev, read literally, would mean 9th. The evening of the 9th would be really the end of the 8th day. Right? But we made this whole derivation to say, no, it means the end of the 9th day before it goes into the 10th day. That's not the literal reading. The literal reading is talking about the 9th day of the month, which begins the night before, at the end of the 8th day. Right? So to keep this more literal, says Rabbi Chia, do we fast the 9th day? Is it not that we fast on the 10th day? Ella, rather, why does the verse say you're fasting on the 9th day? Anybody who eats and drinks on the 9th day, treating it as a quasi Yom Tif, Milo of a Kosev. The verse considers it. It's as if he fasted for the 9th and the 10th day. So eating on Erev Yom Kippur is as important as fasting on Yom Kippur itself. Isn't that quite, that itself is quite the teaching. Not to assume that the fasting on Yom Kippur is because somehow we think that eating is a bad thing. And we wish you never had to eat. Once a year will make you not eat. That's how one might have thought of it. That the Torah is telling you to fast on Yom Kippur on this holiest day because the true holiness is when you don't do any eating. Okay, we can't make you starve yourself to death. Okay, so we're going to make you fast only one day a year. That's how you might have thought of it. Says over here, that's not the case. Eating itself is and should be and can be a holy experience. And therefore, if you eat properly on the 9th day, it's just like you fast on the 10th day. It just so happens to be, Yom Kippur is a more soulful day, so there's no eating. But the objective is to bring that soulful experience into your eating, into your bodily experiences, not to escape the bodily experiences in the soulful experiences of Yom Kippur, but take the soulful experiences of Yom Kippur and bring it to the bodily experiences of your eating. And what's the proof? The day before Yom Kippur, you're told, eat, be merry, and I'm going to treat that as if you fasted. Because eating done right is just as soulful as fasting. It's quite the message. Okay, God willing, tomorrow we get to the part of the Gemara which we learned in the Shulchan Aruch already, which is about foods that are not meant for human consumption. Remember, we read that in the Shulchan Aruch. So the source for that is going to be in the Gemara we're going to learn tomorrow. And then after that, we get into children eating on Yom Kippur. And of course, as always, we're going to learn the Shulchan Aruch afterwards. Have a wonderful day, everybody.